Yo, what's good? Wanted to make a video today to talk about my journey towards becoming a developer. I actually just landed my first job. Starts in January. This is currently December, so I got about a month left until I start the new job. But I just got this new position as a web developer. And I wanted to share my journey because I see a lot of content on YouTube that I feel kind of doesn't. I mean, they tend to focus on like the exceptional cases where people are finding jobs within 6 months, 6 months or less of starting to learn how to code, right? And I'm not saying that that can't be done. I just really think that if we're keeping it real, that's just not going to happen for most people. I'm not saying that it can't be done. Just have some realistic expectations when you're getting into it, because learning how to code, it's difficult. It's a skill. There's a reason why they pay people so much to be software developers, web developers, data scientists, whatever type of coding you want to get into. There's a reason why companies are willing to pay such a premium for that skill, and it's because it's difficult. It's not just something that most people, I feel, can just pick up and just expect to be job ready in 3 to 6 months. I really don't know what the case is when it comes to boot camps, though, because I know that those are very intensive. They're, you got to really, they require like a lot of frequent, you're basically paying to have a job where they're, training you for 8 to 10 hours a day for 3 to 4, 5, 6 months straight. Um, I mean, you probably, if you're watching this video, you probably know about boot camps and how they operate, right? But, anyways, I'm talking about just being like a self-taught, like how the kind of the route that I went. So, let me just give you my journey really quick. Basically, I graduated from college in 2015 in an irrelevant degree. My mistake. I took bad advice. I think I have other videos where you can go watch if you want to know about my advice when you're going into college. But basically, I got an irrelevant degree. I got into sales. It just wasn't really what I wanted to do. As the years went on, 1 or 2 years later, I'm like starting to think like, damn, like this probably is not what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. I just don't like it. So I started to look at what are my options now. Well, I could go back to grad school. I could maybe do like an apprenticeship program. Maybe get some kind of like trade or whatever. Um, and then so I was like exploring a bunch of different options, and eventually I had a friend who recommended I try coding, and like literally like as soon as I tried it, I was like, okay, this is something that I could for sure, this is something that I could for sure, make my career, because I loved it. It was fun. It felt good, and so I started to learn, but it was a bit of a slow process. It took me about 3 years to finally get to the point where I got hired. Um, Now, what did I do during those 3 years, right? Well, first let me first diffuse some of the stuff that they say on various different YouTube channels, and not to downplay. I'm not even going to drop any names because I think that they do produce good content and they get a lot of people inspired and a lot of people motivated to try it out, which is great because as the industry grows, it's kind of funny. Like this is one of those industries that doesn't necessarily get oversaturated, where it's kind of counterintuitive, but it seems like the more developers we have, the more developers we're going to need, right? So, anyways, but one thing that I see a lot of creators talking about is going from zero to hero in 6 months, all self-taught, right? All online stuff, tutorials and whatever. Again, that may work for some people. I'm not downplaying that, but for the vast majority, you better prepare. You get down to 6 months, you might start trying to apply. I think I did like, within 6 months to a year, I started applying for jobs and I just was getting turned down and basically laughed at because I just and now here I am 3 years later, looking back on myself in my 6 month mark. I for sure wasn't ready. I wouldn't even have hired myself. So I was frustrated in that time, but I understand why at this point I'm at now, right? And of course, it was discouraging. Of course, I felt like, damn, of course, a thought popped in my head. Is this even right for me? Now that I'm just getting into my first job, I'm still thinking that, I've got like little worries about what this next, um, what this next job is going to be like, if I'm really going to be able to perform well and, continue to build my portfolio in a strong way that's going to lead me to better opportunities. Because I'll be honest with you, I'm not making that much money in my first job. I'm making like just shy of 50K, which isn't much, especially for a developer. And but that's fine. That's what I expect. I mean, all of my friends, all of my peers, they talk. I mean, even content creators talk about how you'll take a low-paying job for the first 6 months to a year, put in your work, do well, get those good recommendations, add stuff to your portfolio, and your next opportunity is gonna double, triple, some cases, crazy cases, even quadruple that. I've heard people going from, their internship or whatever to making, close to 150 to 200K range. But anyways, yeah, so I fell on my face a lot of times and I got discouraged, and you just got to not let that hold you back. If coding, development, software development, data science or whatever it is, whatever path you want to go down, if it is really something that you discovered, you truly love, you discovered your real passion for, you won't let that stop you and discourage you. And unfortunately, I know some people who also tried to pick up on coding for a lot of the same reasons that I did, because I wanted, a better career. I wanted something that was gonna pay me well, so that I could support my family and build a family, which are all just fine. It's not bad to chase money or anything, but um, making sure that it's not just like, you know what? Let me just backtrack there. I might even just edit this part out, but um, basically, I've had friends, people that I know who tried coding, and they kind of were in the same boat where we think, because we're sold this idea that 6 months down the line we're going to be hired, and 6 months pass by and they don't get hired, and then they just stop. They don't even keep going, and I kept going. I just kept going, and with that said, let me tell you some of the steps that I went through. Because the other thing is, I'll get into that. So, my friend told me to start coding. He recommended Python. I did my research online. I found a lot of people recommending Python. So I jumped right into it, and I started doing little YouTube tutorials or whatever. And to be honest with you, most of it flew right over my head. I did not know what the hell was going on. I didn't understand computer logic. I mean, I understand logic. I've always been in like philosophy and stuff, but I didn't understand like, the way that a computer, the way that code works, right? So it just didn't click at all. Period. So I tell my friend after about a month, tell my friend like, yeah, I don't know, man, this stuff just really isn't making sense, and he's like, well, why don't you try web development then? That's usually like an easier entry point, because you're gonna start off with, well, he didn't really break it down to me like this, but this is why I would recommend starting with web development if something like Python doesn't make sense in the beginning, is because you're gonna start off with HTML, which you'll come to realize isn't really programming. It's just laying out elements, right? And then you get into CSS, which basically manipulates those elements and changes the way they look, the design, right? And you're not really getting into the programming. You're not building functions in HTML or CSS. There's a little bit of like logic involved, but for the most part, it is nothing like JavaScript. It's nothing like Python, but it's easy enough that you start to understand how things sort of fall into place on a web page. And then but more importantly, you get in the habit of coding. You get in the mode. You start to see things. You start to look at the IDE that you're working in, and it starts to like click, you know. So anyway, so I started off doing that, and yeah, I was doing the tutorials. I was doing like YouTube videos and stuff, code along type of stuff, and I was doing like what's that called? Free Code Camp, which is like, you know, basically like little mini chunks, mini lessons, you know, in a sequence. Excuse me. And but I also decided that, you know what, I could afford it. Let me go back to my community college and take a little class, just to have a little bit of discipline, and also to, well, I just had this idea that, you know, there was probably going to be a lot of fundamentals, a lot of like the theory stuff that, you know, maybe isn't what I'm going to be doing ultimately, because I had already learned my lesson with my previous degree. But there's still some value in that, at least for me, and I feel like for most people. So I really took a hybrid approach, you know, and from there I got into JavaScript, and when I got into JavaScript after HTML, CSS, I just kind of hit a roadblock again. I hit a wall that I just felt like I couldn't get past. And one thing, I mean, I still don't really like JavaScript to this day, even though I call myself a web developer. I'm confident in saying that. I specialize in React. I know a bit of Vue, and I love, you know, using like design libraries for Material UI, Bootstrap, and whatnot. But anyways, yeah, one thing about JavaScript that tripped me up, I think trips a lot of people, is that with like the dot notation, if you're not introduced to that slowly, you're just kind of thrown in, like a lot of the YouTube tutorials like to do. They just toss you in. It's hard to really conceptualize and like really understand like how that dot notation works, which is basically you're just calling a method of a function or a class or whatever. Well, I think even my JavaScript class that I was taking at my JC, at my junior college, kind of assumed that you had already taken, you know, your computer science 1 course, which, you know, is either going to be C++ or Java. And you kind of like start to learn about, you know, classes and functions, and then like, you know, different methods and attributes, and how those things work together and how you call those. And I felt like I was just thrown in and I really wasn't catching on. So I actually went back to Python. I went back to Python after I had already left it behind me, decided to try web development. So I went back to Python, and like, dude, it made so much more sense. And I enrolled in a class because I was like, okay, yeah, this is actually, you know, now I'm willing to invest in it. These YouTube tutorials are making sense now. And maybe I'll be successful in a Python class. So I went in a Python class, and dude, I learned so much in that class. And but I just had this nagging feeling in my head, like I need to get back into the web development space, because I just saw, you know, Python was, I mean, it was great learning tool, and I'll probably end up eventually down my career using more of it, and I'm definitely willing to learn more of it. But I kind of just saw it as like it was just going to kind of be like a reset, and I didn't want to just abandon everything that I did. So after I took those classes, after I completed a couple tiny little projects in Python, I went back into JavaScript, and then it was making more sense because I had that experience from Python, and I was able to pivot back into JavaScript, and things were making a lot more sense. So then I started doing projects, and I started, just little personal, little toy projects, little things that I don't even put those things on my portfolio, my resume, or nothing. I don't even think I uploaded most of them to GitHub because they were just little toy projects. But it was a good learning experience. Anyways, then I realized that if you're going to be doing web development, you better learn some frameworks. So I try to get into React. Man, I did not know what the hell was going on when I jumped into React. I was lost again, dude. Like I couldn't understand like what a framework even was. And I guess technically there's like a debate on whether React is truly a framework or is actually like a library or whatever. I'm not going to get into that. But ultimately, you can't just know vanilla JavaScript and expect really to get a job like that. You're going to need to know some sort of framework to be able to land that job. So React going way over my head. And now at this point, this is like, this is a couple years because again, like I didn't have the time to do it 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. And I didn't have the money to pay for a boot camp. And it's not just paying for the boot camp, but also managing your expenses, your living expenses while you're learning, right? So I didn't have the time to do it. I didn't have the money to do it. So I'm just doing this shit like 2 to 4 hours a day max, right? And there would be a lot of days that I just didn't even touch it at all because I was working full time. Sometimes I was even working 2 jobs. So, sometimes I didn't even have time on the weekends. And then, because it's expensive where I'm from. I live up in the Silicon Valley, San Jose. And, so, you gotta hustle. You gotta do what you gotta do to survive if you're not in a certain income bracket to be able to afford living out there. So anyways, I'm hustling, trying to learn the code thing on the side, making slow progress. But anyways, so here we are like about 2 years in. And so I'm falling flat on my face, trying to learn React. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to just keep pressing. I'm going to keep pressing at it. And I think this was like around when COVID started. So actually, that was like a little blessing in disguise because, no, this was after COVID started because I was working through most of 2020. And but eventually lost my employment and then went on to unemployment, UI benefits, which was actually a benefit in disguise. Blessing in disguise because it freed up a ton of time. So what I do? Instantly, boom, went full time in college. Junior college. I didn't go to university or anything because I just did what I could afford. And I thought, you know what? Let me just keep trying this coding thing. Let me take another crack at it. But at the same time, I wanted to have a fallback plan. So I actually took a digital forensics class, which it was cool. It was interesting, but just probably not really what I'm really going to be into. But I also took an AWS class, which is awesome. I'm actually going to be getting AWS certifications. I love AWS. I would definitely advocate for it for any type of developer, or even if you're just wanting to be just a strict cloud engineer. But in addition to that, I just decided, you know what, let me take Swift because if you don't know, Swift is Apple's programming language it started off as their iOS platform, but basically you can build any type of app, desktop, but it's strictly for the Apple ecosystem. So you could build something for desktop, laptops, mobile, or even the watches, right? So anyways, I decided, you know what, let me try Swift because I already knew what Python had did for me in terms of getting me to understand JavaScript better. So I thought maybe if I try a different language, another new language, then that would help. And turns out it totally did. And this is getting into another thing that a lot of these YouTube videos, I feel like just don't really give people like the best idea or the best, they don't represent it in a way that, look, so basically what a lot of creators, a lot of videos will say is pick one language and just do that. Just only get good at that. don't do other languages. You're going to be stretching yourself out too thin. There's no use. And to a certain extent, they're right. There's no use in knowing a little bit about every language. You need to know a production level understanding of one core language in order to get into the industry. And you have to be able to choose, like, what do you want to do? You want to do data science? Like I said, Anyway, so me being a web developer, I'm like, or wanting to be a web developer at this time, yeah, I had my reservations about switching to another programming language, a language that isn't web-based, because I could have maybe tried PHP or something like that. But anyways, fuck all that. If you need to, try something new. You burn out after a little bit. So it actually helps to have a little bit of a refresher. And I'm telling you, man, like, you learn a little bit more about whatever, you learn a little bit more about just the concepts in general, which ultimately at the end of the day, programming is all about, not just knowing the language in and out, but knowing how to solve the problem, knowing how to find the answer, knowing how to read documentation, how to, search for your answers online and implement the answer in a way that works for your project, for your piece of software, whatever you're making. And those were the skills that I learned by switching to different languages. So don't listen to these channels or people saying, no, don't switch your language. Just do this and don't switch up, because you're just gonna hold yourself back. Look, man, some people can just keep pounding away and eventually fit the square piece into a round hole. But man, not everybody's going to be like that. So don't worry about switching up. It could actually really help you. So I took those Swift classes, and I still really love Swift. I'd like to explore it more in the future. But, here we are about 6 to 9 months after I had lost my job, and it's getting down to the wire. My UI benefits are running out. My unemployment benefits are running out. So I'm like, all right, I need to find a job. I need to, because I'm gonna be broke and with zero cash flow pretty soon. So I realized that if I have any shot at making it, it's gonna be what I've been doing the most, which is web development. So boom, I get back into JavaScript. Someone recommended that I try Vue. It's a little bit easier to learn than React. And I would totally 100% stand by that. Definitely in my experience, it was a bit easier. And then, but then I was just looking at jobs available, and honestly, React is number one. It just is. You can find Vue jobs for sure, but React is number one. So I learned, got my feet wet with Vue, built a couple actual projects that I actually did put up on my GitHub and stuff, and then jumped back into React, dude, and it made so much more sense. And I can't help but feel that a lot of that came from, what I did with the switching from Python back to JavaScript to Swift back to JavaScript. So all in all, took me about 3 years. Here I am, super juiced, super excited. This is everything that I've been building up for. And I just wanted to share this with y'all because, I just feel like there's so much content out there that says that you can make it in 6 months. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that can. If you can do it, man, kudos to you. Congratulations. That's fucking dope. But just understand, if you're just starting out, man, it might not be that quick for you, dude. And you're going to have to be able to just keep going and persevere and not take no for the answer and not hold yourself back mentally and just keep pressing away at it, man, because a lot of people, it's going to take a couple of years, man. That's just how it is. And then also number 2, just don't worry so much about pivoting to different languages and different frameworks. Like, try different things out, like ultimately, how are you even going to know what you really want to get into if you don't actually try it? And also, you may actually find some usefulness in the concepts. In the concepts and the just the generalities that you learn from switching from language to language. So don't have any worry about it. Don't listen to these YouTubers saying not to do this, not to do that. I mean, just do what works for you. And trust me, if you're really passionate about it like I am, you're going to find your way. So with that, peace.